You're living in your standard run-of-the-mill fantasy world full of swords and magic, right? You think you're doing okay until your party steps on a goofy teleportation trap and gets yeeted straight to the deepest, darkest floor of the supposedly already cleared Gozel dungeon. Yeah, classic isekai bad luck. But instead of some weak leftover slimes, they're staring down the true boss, an insanely OP, top-tier monster, literally just called the Grim Reaper. And right at this exact terrifying moment, our boy Wolka, panting and covered in cold sweat, suddenly has a massive galaxy brain realization. While the Reaper is out here absolutely wiping the floor with them, moving like a shadow and violently slashing his party members while they desperately scream his name, Wolka figures out the dark, twisted truth about his existence. As blood spurts from his horribly mangled arm and he groans in pure agony, he watches the Reaper just menacingly hover there. Bro could finish them all off with a single strike, but nah. This boss is a total menace who is getting a sick kick out of tormenting them first. In Wolka's mind, he can already see the gruesome, uncensored bad ending playing out. He's gonna get ripped to absolute shreds, and after the monster takes its sweet time torturing his precious comrades, it's going to eat them alive. But why the hell is he only realizing this right now? It's been 17 whole years since he reincarnated into this world, and it finally hits him like an absolute truck. This reality is actually based on a manga's plot. And the worst part, they aren't the main characters. They are literally just the foil fodder, the doomed, unnamed mob party, whose sole purpose in the early stages of the story is to get completely annihilated just to hype up how strong the monster is, right before the actual protagonist shows up to save the day. Talk about getting scammed by the reincarnation system. Wolka knows they wouldn't stand a fighting chance against this boss even at max HP, let alone right now when nobody has an ounce of stamina left. Running isn't an option, and holding out for the real MC's plot armor to arrive is basically impossible. As Wolka bitterly accepts that they are quite literally doomed by the narrative itself, the girls in his party are completely losing their minds. Eulitia and Atori are sobbing hysterically, clinging to him in despair, begging him not to die on them and pleading for him to just run away without them. They are completely breaking down, hyperventilating and screaming apologies because they think this entire catastrophe is their fault. Seeing his comrades, the girls who harbor such extreme, desperate emotions for him, crying their eyes out on the cold dungeon floor. Something seems to click inside Wolka, with his party weeping uncontrollably and the game's plot dictating their absolute, undeniable demise. You gotta wonder, is our guy really just gonna roll over and accept this totally trashed Annihilation ending? Or is he about to flip the entire script and show this world's author how a real, happy ending supremacist gets things done? Looking at the girls sobbing on the cold stone floor, Wolka clenches his mangled fist, and something shifts in his eyes. He might just be mob character number 3 destined for the slaughter, and honestly, he couldn't care less about his own damn life at this point. But he made a vow to make these girls happy no matter what, and he'll be damned if he lets some edgy hooded skeleton ruin that. Wait a minute, his galaxy brain kicks in again. Not all hope is lost. If this reality is strictly following the manga's plot, he knows exactly how the actual protagonist defeats this boss later on in a massive epic 3-page spread. That means he already knows the strategy to take this guy out. Looking back at Eulitia with a bloody grin, he casually tells her that a death ending where everyone dies never sat right with him anyway. Ignoring their panicked, tearful pleas for him to stop, he forces his battered, bleeding body off the ground, making a silent promise to himself. He might die today, but he's gonna thoroughly crush this trash-tier bad ending before he goes down. With the girls screaming his name in absolute terror, Wolka grips his katana. He spent 10 literal years in this isekai world, honing a very specific sword-drawing technique. Will it actually do anything against a true boss? Who knows, but we ball. He charges forward, completely clearing his mind of the fear, the dungeon, and the screaming. He dives deeper and deeper into his own consciousness until he reaches a state of absolute Zen-like serenity. It's actually crazy, but dancing right on the precipice of death feels kind of amazing. The agonizing pain in his severed arm completely vanishes, and the fear is just gone. Funneling every single microscopic drop of his remaining strength and life force into one final desperate gamble, Wolka unleashes a massive blinding strike straight at the Grim Reaper, catching the arrogant monster completely off guard. The impact is so intense that the entire world just flashes white, and then slowly, a blurry wooden ceiling comes into view. Wolka blinks his eyes open, groggily wondering where the hell he is. Spoilers. It's not the afterlife. He's lying in a cozy sunlit bed. Before he can even process how he's still breathing, the bedroom door slowly creaks open, and in walks the witch of the party, looking completely dead inside like she hasn't slept in an eternity. She starts to drone out a lifeless, empty, "Oh, master," before her eyes actually focus on the bed. Wolka barely gets out a cheeky comment about her terribly long face before the poor girl absolutely shatters. Tears instantly flood her eyes as she violently stammers his name, rushing toward the bed in a total emotional meltdown, only to immediately trip over her own robes and faceplant spectacularly onto the floor. Classic. Panicking, Wolka tries to heroically leap out of bed to help her, shouting to see if she's okay, but his own body instantly hits him with a big fat nope. He wildly flails through the air, completely missing the landing, and crashes onto the floor right next to her. Sitting there in a tangled, pathetic mess, he just awkwardly chuckles and mutters, "Oopsies, lost my balance there for a sec. Bro, you literally just fought the Grim Reaper and defied the laws of narrative fate. I think you get a pass for being a little wobbly on your feet." So there Wolka is, tangled up on the floor, but as he tries to push himself up, he immediately realizes something is severely wrong with his body. The witch, who he calls Master, frantically tells him to stay put, sobbing and apologizing profusely. Wolka, being the nice guy he is, apologizes for worrying her and admits he doesn't remember a single thing about yesterday. He asks the million-dollar question, what on earth happened to him? The witch looks at him with utter despair and points out the brutal, horrific truth. His left leg is just gone. As the shock sets in, the memories of the dungeon flood back into Wolka's mind. He remembers being on the absolute verge of death against the Grim Reaper. And if losing a leg wasn't enough of a wake-up call, the witch tearfully drops another bomb. His right eye got slashed, and he's permanently blind in it. Yikes. Talk about paying the toll to cheat death. As Wolka processes his missing limbs, he thinks back to his past life in Japan and the wretched dark fantasy manga this world is based on. He remembers exactly how this story goes. Whether you're the main character or a literal nobody, the author of this trash-tier manga made sure everyone met a pitiful, merciless, and completely grotesque death. But since our boy is a massive happy-ending supremacist, he basically looked at the script, said, "Nah, I'd win," and rewrote their fate. Suddenly snapping back to reality, Wolka panics, asking if Ulicia and Atori made it out okay. Right on cue, the door flies open. The two girls drop their shopping bags the second they see him awake and immediately tackle him back onto the bed, bawling their eyes out. Ulicia is sobbing about how glad she is, and even the usually stoic Atori admits she was worried sick. Wolka looks at his party, feeling a bit of pain as they accidentally press against his fresh wounds, but honestly, he couldn't care less. In his mind, he just pulled off the biggest flex ever by beating that cursed, trauma-inducing manga plot. He saved his precious friends from a fate worse than death. Smiling like an absolute giga-chad, he tells the girls not to beat themselves up. He literally says, "Losing an eye and a leg is no big deal. I got to save you after all, so I'm fine." Bro, you did not just say that. Little did Wolka know that single, heroic, self-sacrificing line was the exact trigger needed to completely shatter their already fragile sanity. I mean, think about it. These girls just spent 10 agonizing days watching him hover on the brink of death, their hearts practically imploding from guilt. So when he drops a line like that, the atmosphere in the room instantly shifts from a tearful reunion to a creepy, insanely tense wake. His master violently clings to his arm, crying hysterically with eyes that scream yandere awakening, vowing to never leave his side and begging him not to forsake her. Wolka tries to calm her down, but she just completely shuts him down, screaming that she won't listen. Then Ulicia steps up, and oh boy, her eyes are completely dead. With a terrifyingly sweet smile, she tells him he never needs to lift a finger again. They are going to do literally everything for him from now on to make sure he never feels pain again. Atori chimes in with that same unhinged, obsessive look, promising to give him her body, her life, and everything she has, swearing she's ready to die for his sake. Wolka is sweating bullets, desperately trying to establish some boundaries, but it's totally useless. Yeah, he successfully evaded the Annihilation ending, but congratulations, Wolka. You just unlocked the obsessive yandere harem route. His entire party has completely lost their minds, and as the camera pans out to the peaceful church exterior, all you can hear is our poor, battered hero frantically screaming that he can wipe his own body by himself. Task failed successfully, I guess. After getting absolutely mangled by the Grim Reaper, Wolka is safely transported back to the town of Luther and hospitalized in the local cathedral. As he lies there recovering, he finally confirms what he suspected. This reality is 100% the world of that dark fantasy manga he read in his previous life. But here's the hilarious part. Our boy was only reading it for the top-notch art. Since he's a massive happy ending supremacist who hates edgy tragedy porn, he basically skimmed the lore and remembers absolutely nothing about the plot. Well, except for one crazy detail he just learned. The person who actually dragged his half-dead body out of the dungeon was none other than the protag of the original manga. Talk about a crazy cameo. But right now, Wolka has bigger problems to stress over, like the fact that he's permanently missing his right eye and left leg, leaving him wondering what the hell he's supposed to do next. And as if adjusting to a missing limb wasn't hard enough, he wakes up to a brand new, suffocating reality. He opens his remaining eye and lets out a heavy sigh because his magic master, mage Lizalarte, is literally sleeping in his bed, clinging to him like a koala. Normally, despite her youthful looks, she's the oldest in the party and talks like a grumpy old lady to sound intimidating. But after the dungeon trauma, she completely dropped the tough act, declared she's sleeping with him, and absolutely refuses to leave his side. While Wolka is trying to mentally accept this new clingy dynamic, there's a knock on the door, and in walks Ulicia. One look at his terrible wounds, and a dark, terrifying shadow falls over her eyes. She leans in and drops a monologue so unhinged it sends shivers down Wolka's spine, promising that he never has to lift a finger again because they are going to take care of his every single need, awake or asleep, forever and ever. Volka is internally screaming because this is beyond scary. But then Ulisha gets psychic whiplash, instantly snapping back to a bright, bubbly smile and cheerfully wishing him good morning. She even forcefully drags the elderly acting Lisel out of bed like a nagging mother handling a toddler, completely reversing their age dynamics. When Ulisha asks if he has any plans for the day, Volka nervously tries to establish some boundaries, saying he's just going to chill and get accustomed to his impaired body. Big mistake. Ulisha's face instantly drops into pure depression as she asks if she isn't dependable enough. Sweating bullets, Volka backpedals, saying he relies on her too much, while internally having a panic attack because he knows that back in his previous life in Japan, having a 13-year-old girl wait on him, hand and foot, would be a literal crime. But Ulisha isn't having it. Her eyes go completely dead again as she scolds him for pushing himself to the verge of death, declaring that they made a solemn vow to never mess up again and will protect him at all costs. She's legit scaring him to death. Then, like a glitched-out Skyrim NPC, she starts looping the same question with a completely empty, lifeless smile. "Can I do anything for you? Can I be of any assistance?" Realizing the smile doesn't reach her eyes at all, Volka desperately hands her a quest just to break the loop, asking for some water. Ulisha gasps like she committed a mortal sin for not thinking of it first, grabs Lisel to get her washed up, and practically sprints out of the room. Left alone, Volka violently rubs his stomach, feeling stress ulcers forming in real time. He thinks back to how Ulisha used to be a quiet, demure, and responsible little swordswoman who just wanted to learn his techniques. But now, he's successfully survived the bad ending, only to realize he accidentally triggered the overprotective yandere route, and honestly, he might not survive the stress. As Volka lies in bed, his mind wanders to Ulisha's past, how she is actually a 13-year-old prodigy with unparalleled talent in swordsmanship. But her actual brothers were so insanely jealous of her skills that she almost considered giving up the sword entirely. Thinking about swords naturally gives our boy the itch to move. Figuring he should probably change his clothes before his suffocating, overprotective party members get back, he swings his legs over the side of the bed and pushes off. But he completely forgets one tiny microscopic detail. He literally doesn't have a left leg anymore. The moment he tries to stand, gravity hits him like a truck, and he face plants hard onto the wooden floor. Groaning in pain and clutching his face, he looks back at his missing limb, sighing about how much this sucks, but thanking his lucky stars that at least nobody was around to witness that totally embarrassing blunder. But speak of the devil, right on cue, the door opens, and in walks his magic master, Liselarte. She takes one look at him sprawled out on the floor and absolutely loses her mind. Screaming his name, she dives across the room and tackles him with a desperate hug. Volka tries to play it cool, stammering that he just slipped and to hold up a second, but Liselarte is already in full panic mode. She's shrieking at her stupid disciple for trying to overexert himself, completely terrified that his wounds have reopened and is literally about to sprint out to fetch the cathedral sister. Volka has to physically shout over her to get her to stop, insisting that he is completely fine. But this only makes things worse. Master freezes, her eyes going wide and completely dead as she mutters that he clearly can't be left to his own devices ever again. Yikes. After she awkwardly helps him back into bed, Volka tries to logically explain the situation. He tells her it's just phantom limb syndrome. His brain still thought his leg was there, so he tried to stand like normal and ended up wobbling over. He casually admits it's high time he gets used to his new body, but Master is vibrating with pure, unfiltered despair. Tears are welling up in her eyes as she asks how the heck he can be so insanely calm about losing his left leg and his right eye. Doesn't it frustrate him at all? Volka, being the ultimate Giga-Chad, just drops the hardest truth bomb on her. He honestly never expected to survive that boss fight in the first place. Instead of wallowing in depression over his missing limbs, he is just genuinely relieved that he managed to protect his companions and make it out alive. You'd think this heroic, selfless speech would comfort her, right? Nope, it completely backfires. Master starts bawling even harder, viciously blaming herself for accepting that cursed quest, and sobbing that she is a totally useless burden, while he has to bear all the permanent consequences of her shortcomings. Volka is sitting there, utterly bewildered, internally screaming because her crying is literally giving him a stress ulcer. He is 100% sure a hole is going to burn straight through his stomach if this keeps up. Cut to a bit later, Volka is stretching in bed, dying of sheer boredom. He desperately wants to go do some training, but he knows if he even breathes the word training, Master and the others will probably chain him to the bed for his own safety. He realizes that ever since the dungeon incident, everything the girls say and do is just way too extreme. Though, to be fair, he can't exactly blame them. Watching your friend get mangled by the Grim Reaper and permanently disabled is grade A trauma, and they are clearly trapped in a toxic downward spiral of guilt and constant what-ifs. He knows that if he were in their shoes, he'd probably be wallowing in powerlessness too. But as he stares up at the ceiling, a much darker, much more personal realization starts to creep in. He might be putting on a brave face for the girls, but the harsh reality of his situation is finally hitting him. How on earth is he supposed to make a comeback as a swordsman when he's lost his right eye and his left leg, which just so happens to be his dominant foot? Volka is lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling and having a full-blown existential crisis. He remembers fighting the Grim Reaper purely out of adrenaline-fueled desperation, but the harsh reality of his situation is really starting to sink in. He honestly only picked up a sword in this isekai reality because his childish brain thought it looked cool. But now, he's missing his dominant leg and an eye in an unhinged dark fantasy world where they've completely derailed the main plot. He's literally praying to whatever gods are listening that this world has some top-tier prosthetic legs, so he can eventually walk the path of a swordsman again. Suddenly, his deep thoughts are violently interrupted when Atori casually hops onto the bed and straight up straddles him. With a little, "and hup," she pins him down, causing Volka's heart to practically jump out of his chest. When he frantically asks what the heck she's doing, this extreme battle junkie deadpan tells him to relax. She was just attacking him to see if he was awake. Bro, getting mounted and fake attacked by a heavy fighter from a warrior race who could snap you like a twig is not a joke. Sweating bullets, Volka begs her to give him a break, pointing out his vulnerable missing leg. But Atori just leans in closer with a completely straight face, whispering that she'll be the one doing the moving, and she bets it'll feel good. Pause. Volka is internally screaming, desperately using their master's imminent arrival as an excuse to hit the brakes on whatever spicy, terrifying direction this is heading. Atori finally backs off a bit, looking genuinely concerned as she asks if his leg still hurts. Volka explains that the cathedral's holy magic sealed the wound perfectly, so he's completely pain-free. Relieved, Atori casually drops the fact that she just went out and hunted down practically every single monster in the surrounding area. Hearing this, a horrifying realization hits Volka. Master, Eulichia, and Atori are all absolute monstrous powerhouses. Meanwhile, he's currently a defective, crippled swordsman. Doesn't that make him basically human luggage? He gently tries to tell Atori that he's struggling to get used to his impaired body and won't be fighting anytime soon, effectively giving her an out to leave him behind. But Atori completely shuts that down. She crawls closer, her eyes locking onto his with terrifying intensity, and declares there is absolutely zero chance she'd ever leave him alone. She blames herself for his injuries, stating that in her warrior culture, if someone saves your life, you pay them back with your own. And then she drops the heaviest, most intensely devoted yandere vow you've ever heard. She pledges that every single strand of her hair, every shard of her bone, every drop of her blood, and her very soul now belong entirely to him. She promises to live and die solely for his sake, telling him to rest easy. Volka, trying to keep his cool while practically suffocating under the weight of her devotion, thanks her for being so considerate. Atori's immediate response, "Then can I attack you?" Volka instantly hits her with a hard nope. She even pouts, asking if he'd prefer to be the one doing the attacking, because she's totally down for that too. Thank God Eulichia suddenly knocks on the door and drags Atori away to go shopping, because the second the door clicks shut, Volka completely loses his mind. He violently clutches his head, realizing that every single girl in his party has caught the exact same heavy, overprotective yandere virus. If he does anything to make even one of these girls feel down, he is going to be in knee-deep trouble. He thought he beat the system by avoiding the Annihilation bad ending, but he just blindly walked straight into the toxic, obsessive dark root. He definitely counted his chickens way too early, but honestly, manga plot or not, these girls are his irreplaceable comrades, and he'll be damned if he doesn't get them all a happily ever after. He realizes that seeing him in this helpless state is what's mentally draining them and driving them completely insane. If he wants to survive this, and keep his stomach from literally developing a stress hole, he needs to get his independence back fast. So, what's our crippled Gigachad's first move? He clenches his fist, swears to get his normal life back, and immediately starts doing an intense workout right there on top of the bed. So, how exactly does a guy with half his limbs missing start his epic training arc? By doing one-armed, one-legged push-ups right there on the mattress. Obviously. Volka is sweating bullets, shaking like a leaf as he struggles to hit 100 reps while Master Lee Sel sits there watching him like an incredibly stressed-out mother hen. He totally collapses on the bed, panting heavily and realizing that getting his normal life back is going to be one hell of an uphill battle. His body is super rusty, but he refuses to just lay around doing nothing while he waits for his custom prosthetic leg to arrive. Just as he's catching his breath, Yulisha bursts into the room with a blinding smile, handing him a wet towel like the ultimate devoted waifu. But Volta notices she's completely strapped with her sword. When he asks about it, she cheerfully announces that she and Atori are heading out to farm some monsters today. And then, she drops the absolute critical hit to Volka's pride. She tells him with the sweetest, most innocent smile that she's going to earn enough money for him too, so he can just rest easy. Oof. Emotional damage. Volka literally slumps over in utter defeat, his soul leaving his body as the horrifying reality sets in. He is currently a lowly, jobless bum, loafing around in bed, while a 13-year-old girl goes out to be the absolute breadwinner of the house. Meanwhile, out on the highway, we finally get a glimpse of the original manga's actual protagonist. And ironically enough, the supposed hero of this universe is currently running for his absolute life. This kid wanted to prove to the adults that he wasn't just a brat, so he arrogantly tried to solo a highway boss, only to end up getting chased down by two massive, terrifying wolf monsters. Panting and tripping over his own feet, the kid thinks he's a goner until he spots a young girl, Ulycia, standing right in the monster's warpath. Trying to play the hero, he reaches out and screams for her to run, but before the word even leaves his mouth, slash! In the blink of an eye, Ulycia completely deletes both massive wolves, turning them into a fountain of blood with a single, flawless sword strike. The actual main character falls flat on his butt, utterly flabbergasted as Ulycia calmly sheathes her sword. Acting like she just accidentally stole his exp in an MMO, she politely apologizes, asking if those wolves were his prey since they just lunged at her out of nowhere. The kid is stammering, apologizing profusely, and totally intimidated by her effortless, frenzied aura. But Ulycia just flashes him a gentle smile, casually telling him he can keep all the loot drops because she's busy looking for someone, aka farming more mobs to pay for Volka's medical bills. She dashes off at supersonic speed, leaving the original protagonist sitting in the dirt, blushing like a total scrub, and wishing he had at least gotten her name. Looks like the mob characters are officially stealing the main character's spotlight. While the original main character is busy sitting in the dirt, questioning his entire existence, Ulycia is sprinting through the forest, but she is definitely not celebrating her epic save. In fact, she is having a total internal meltdown. She's frantically thinking that this is not good, not nearly enough, and that literally everything she does feels totally inadequate. She's incredibly frustrated that she couldn't protect her precious senpai this week, and that he wouldn't let her lift a finger for him. In her mind, Volka would have slashed through those wolves so cleanly, he wouldn't have even gotten a single drop of blood on his blade. Swearing to herself that she'll be the one to protect him, she effortlessly decapitates another monster that lunges at her. But she isn't satisfied in the slightest. Looking at her bloody sword, She admits she has a massive skill issue compared to him, and a long way to go to catch up. She remembers Wolka's unprecedented, unheard-of sword-drawing techniques, flashing back to his fight with the Grim Reaper. She recalls how his moves were literally lightning fast, drawing his blade so quickly you couldn't even process it, unleashing a slash that appeared to slice through light itself. She realizes that a swordsman can only tap into that ultimate potential by putting absolutely everything on the line. But then, the darkest, heaviest guilt trip hits her like a freight train. She remembers that she was the one who accidentally activated the teleportation trap in the dungeon. She is the sole reason they encountered the true boss, the reason Wolka lost an eye and his dominant leg. If it weren't for her, his swordplay would have reached unprecedented territory and left a legendary mark on history. As she violently slices through a giant mantis monster and then a flaming bird, her guilt morphs into pure, unfiltered obsession. Covered in monster blood, she declares that her foolish screw-up stripped the world of its most respected swordsman. So, she has a ton of work to do to make amends. She decides that she must get stronger, inherit his techniques, and prove their absolute supremacy to the world. And then, she reaches peak, unhinged yandere territory. With a terrifyingly sweet smile, she decides that all her senpai has to do from now on is entrust her with his everything. She vows to protect him, ensure no one ever harms him again, and fiercely declares that she won't let anyone ever take him away from her. Yeah, that smile is cute, but the crazy behind those eyes is a massive flashing red flag. Meanwhile, while Yulisha is having her obsessive villain origin monologue, Atori is out in another part of the woods doing some aggressive landscaping. She recalls Yulisha declaring earlier that she was going to commit a localized monster genocide, picking off every single mob so the roads would be perfectly safe for Wolka's eventual return to the holy capital, before randomly wandering off on her own. Wondering how far the crazy swordswoman has gone, Atori leaps into the air and brings her massive halberd down in a nuclear, explosive smash that absolutely obliterates a giant bird monster. Dusting herself off with a quick phew, Atori rests her weapon on her shoulder, casually noting that she's pretty much wiped the server clean of mobs in her designated area. Realizing she got completely separated from Yulichia during their farming session, she just gives a typical gamer shrug. Well, whatever, she thinks, her earring glinting in the sunlight. She figures she'll just catch up with her back at the spawn point in town anyway. Ah, the Adventurers Guild, the classic fantasy gig economy hub where you turn monster corpses into hard cash. Atori walks through the doors, hauling a massive sack of loot that she casually dumps onto the counter with a heavy thunk. The receptionist is absolutely stunned, welcoming her back and promising to assess this massive haul as usual, while the guys in the back start gossiping like a bunch of high schoolers. They're whispering about how incredible she is, bringing in hauls that several grown adults would struggle to carry. One of the guys tries to act slick, pointing out how cute she is and how her clothes are kind of revealing, but his buddy immediately shuts him down, calling him a dumbass. He warns him that someone saw Atori fight, and she was swinging a giant halberd around like a toothpick, massacring monsters without taking a single break, almost like she was possessed by a demon. While the local scrubs are busy being terrified, the receptionist hands Atori her massive payout, just as Yulisha runs up, breathing a sigh of relief that her friend is safe. Atori apologizes for leaving her behind, but Yulisha doesn't mind at all. The gossip guys in the back are at it again, creepily whispering about how Yulisha is a total cutie too, but their jaws completely drop when the 13-year-old casually slams her own massive, overflowing sack of loot onto the counter, politely asking for an assessment. The receptionist is practically sweating bullets at this point. Changing the subject, Yulisha excitedly tells Atori about a local stall selling fruit water, which is basically fancy steeped fruit juice. Atori's eyes light up, and she immediately suggests buying some as a souvenir to make Wolka and Lisel happy. Yulisha beams with pure, wholesome waifu energy, absolutely sure that her beloved senpai will be thrilled, so they agree to grab the drinks and head straight back to the clinic. Meanwhile, back at the Cathedral Hospital, our resident disabled hero is fast asleep and snoring like a chainsaw. Wolka suddenly bolts upright, gasping for air, and immediately slumps over in absolute self-pity, face-palming and calling himself a slothful deadbeat. Dude, You exhausted yourself doing bed push-ups with one leg. Cut yourself some slack. He contemplates starting his daily sword swing practice to speed up his recovery, but as he's overthinking, he feels a tiny, trembling hand rustling under the covers, tightly clenching his. He looks down and realizes his magic master, Lisa, is fast asleep right beside him. But as he watches her, he notices tears streaming down her face as she whimpers and cries out in her sleep, begging him not to go, not to leave her behind, and not to leave her alone. Wolka's expression softens into deep, heavy sadness. Looking at his sobbing master, the harsh reality finally hits him. This isn't just about his physical recovery anymore. The terrifying trauma of almost watching him die has completely shattered these girls' minds, leaving them with deep psychological scars, and Wolka knows he has to get strong enough to heal them. Looking down at his master sobbing in her sleep, Wolka starts having some serious post-battle regrets. He doesn't think he made the wrong choice back in that dungeon. After all, with his cheat knowledge of the original manga, he was the only one who could have possibly defeated the Grim Reaper. He had to throw his own life on the line to save his friends. There simply was no other option. But as he feels her tiny hand desperately clutching his, he realizes his reckless, "I don't mind dying" attitude was a massive mistake. Even if he's a reincarnated soul with future knowledge, he's not some omnipotent god. To these girls, he isn't some legendary cheat character. He's just a human named Wolka, and he is the only one they have left in this brutal world. Squeezing her hand back, he softly whispers to her sleeping form, promising that it'll be fine because he is right here. Meanwhile, we get a dramatic scene transition over to Grunfros, the majestic holy capital, where the local authorities are completely losing their minds over the latest news. Inside a grand cathedral-like palace, a short-haired girl is excitedly gossiping with the heavenly swordswoman, a gorgeous, veiled maiden also known as Lily White. The reporter reveals that the legendary Grim Reaper has actually been slayed by an A-rank party, boasting that their local adventurers are absolutely cracked. Lily White is genuinely surprised, noting that this is the first subjugation by one of the elite 7 parties in 4 long years. But as she scans the report, her eyes widen when she reads the party's name, Silvery Gray. Her composure instantly shatters as she slams her hands on the table, frantically asking if that is Sir Wolka's party. Her friend tries to play peacekeeper, begging her to calm down and pointing out that the dungeon they cleared was supposedly a low-level one that was already cleared recently. But Lily White is sweating bullets, demanding to know what happened to Wolka. The reporter hesitates before dropping the absolute worst-case scenario. Wolka managed to survive, but he suffered devastating permanent injuries, losing both an eye and a leg. The news hits Lily White like a physical blow. Her face goes completely pale with horror, and before her friend can even finish telling her to stay calm, Lily White completely loses her cool, violently breaking free of the reporter's grip and screaming at her to let her go. As she sprints out of the palace in a state of absolute, unhinged panic, her desperate cries for Sir Wolka echo through the grand halls. Yep, just when you thought Wolka had his hands full with his current yandere harem, another high-tier crazy girl is running straight his way. Talk about escaping the frying pan and jumping straight into a nuclear reactor. So, our boy Wolka is finally getting back on his feet. Well, his foot and a brand new chunk of wood. He straps on the prosthetic leg, takes one step, and nearly faceplants, immediately pointing out the obvious. This thing feels absolutely disgusting. The head nun overseeing his recovery just chuckles, telling him it's a totally normal reaction, but sadly, it's the absolute best they can get their hands on in this town. Lisa checks in on him as he wobbles around like a newborn fawn, and Wolka discovers the secret to his new limb. It attaches to his stump using a literal slime. Yeah, Mana makes the slime stick to his leg, which acts as a cushion to relieve pressure, but Wolka can't help but cringe at how incredibly sticky and gross it feels. The nun shuts down any wild ideas he might be having, reminding him that this leg is strictly for daily use, not for going out and doing adventurer stuff. But Wolka is stubborn as hell. He starts practicing his walking in the hallway, leaning heavily against the wall while sweating bullets, realizing that getting his sense of balance back is going to be a total nightmare. Lise, being the worried angel she is, tells him not to push himself so hard. But Wolka brushes it off with a smile, saying he can't just sleep his life away. Internally, though, the dude is stressed. He knows that if he can't walk on his own, his dream of rejoining society is completely cooked. Plus, he really doesn't want to be a burden to his master and the girls. More than anything, he realizes his entire life has revolved around his swordsmanship, and without a blade in his hand, he feels like he's losing his damn identity. But before he can get too deep into his existential crisis, a massive racket echoes from the doorway, and a gorgeous, super long-haired girl in a cleric outfit violently bursts into the room screaming his name. Wolka is stunned for a second before recognizing her as Anze. She practically throws herself at his feet, tearing up as she apologizes for not being there and having no idea he was going through such harrowing pain. Wolka awkwardly tries to calm her down, assuring her that the worst is over, which immediately prompts Anze's eyes to sparkle with terrifying intensity. With zero hesitation, she demands that they head back to the holy capital immediately so they can live together in the cathedral forever, causing Lise and the rest of Wolka's party to let out a collective, heavily offended, "Huh?" Anze completely ignores their glares, promising Wolka that her organization will provide him with all the support and time he needs to heal in the safest place in the world. For some context, Anze used to be Wolka's therapist back at their home base, and she's actually a high-ranking sister in the Citadel, a central church organization led by 4 literal incarnations of God. Wolka knows she means well, but her magnanimous heart comes with incredibly exaggerated overkill emotions. Before he can tell her to chill with the nonsense, Lisa steps up, activating her protective waifu defense mode, straight up telling Anze that Wolka is her dear comrade and she ain't taking him anywhere. But Anze is a seasoned pro at this game. She hits Lise with the most understanding, sorrowful look imaginable, gently grabbing her hands and validating her feelings. She completely disarms the girls by saying she knows how devastated they must be over Wolka's injuries, and that since she wasn't there to protect him during the monster attack, she could never possibly blame them for being defensive. Wolka watches in absolute awe as Anze enters her full-on good-natured mode, successfully pacifying even his battle-hardened master with her overwhelming holy aura. Lise stammers, trying to hold her ground by questioning the whole living together part, but Anze drops the ultimate bait. She invites all of them to come live at the cathedral too. She flashes a saintly smile and promises that the Citadel will cover everything: daily meals, constant healing, and even a top-tier prosthetic leg for Wolka. The girls, completely brainwashed by the sheer convenience and kindness, nod in unison like a bunch of hypnotized pigeons, leaving Wolka sweating bullets in pure terror. While the girls think they've just secured a luxury hotel stay, Wolka's internal alarms are blaring, realizing that this saint might as well be an assassin sent by the church to completely destroy his plans of living a normal, independent life. Wolka's brain immediately goes into overdrive as he suspects this whole move to the cathedral pitch is just a trap to monitor him 24/7, especially since the Citadel's knights are always patrolling anyway. Trying to be as polite as possible without triggering another crying fit, he tells Anze he appreciates the offer but firmly declines. He insists he'll get used to the peg leg on his own and won't need to go begging the church for a handout. Deep down, our boy just has way too much pride. He absolutely refuses to be a wimp who cries over a lost limb, and the idea of becoming a lazy freeloader while others pamper him feels fundamentally wrong. But of course, Anze is a masterclass in emotional damage. She immediately casts her eyes down, looking absolutely devastated as she apologizes for suggesting something so pretentious, lamenting about how utterly powerless she is to help him. And just like that, Wolka's entire party flips on him. Lise and the girls shoot him venomous glares that basically scream, "Look what you did to this poor angel," leaving Wolka utterly flabbergasted that his own team switched sides so fast. Sweating bullets, he desperately backpedals, assuring Anze he doesn't think of her as a nuisance. He gently explains that he just wants to face his physical limits head-on before relying on anyone else, promising to ask for her help if he truly hits a wall. Anze instantly lights up, giving him a heart-melting smile and swearing her heart is always with him, leaving Wolka internally baffled as to why this girl goes to such extreme lengths for him when they aren't even that close. But before the romantic tension can escalate any further, the door gets practically kicked open by a blindingly handsome, flashy knight named Roche, who loudly apologizes for his late arrival, blaming his bright allure for getting him swarmed by the local ladies. The girls instantly hit him with a synchronized glare, telling him to shut up and calling him an annoying pest, but Roche just laughs it off. Despite his overwhelming playboy energy, Roach is actually an elite knight of the Citadel and a genuine friend to Wolka. He drops the act for a second, asking about the leg. Wolka gives it to him straight. He can't get used to it and probably won't ever swing a sword like he used to. Roach looks genuinely bummed out, admitting he really wanted to keep sparring and honing their skills together, but he quickly slaps Wolka on the back, hyping his bro up by saying a little missing limb isn't enough to keep a stubborn guy like him down. After securing his screen time, Roach dips out to go flirt with more women in the city, leaving Anzi and the party alone with Wolka. Deciding it's time to actually do some rehab, Wolka stands up from his chair. Anzi immediately holds her arms out, gently telling him to walk to her first. But Lise is not having it. Her protective waifu instincts kick in, and she steps right in front of Anzi, demanding Wolka walk to her instead. Suddenly, all the girls are standing in a circle with their arms out like he's a toddler taking his first steps. Trying not to fall, Wolka accidentally stumbles in Eulithia's direction. Eulithia practically glows with victory, bragging that he chose her, while Liza looks ready to start a holy war over it. Wolka awkwardly tries to explain he just lost his balance and needs them to pick an order, but as he watches the girls playfully bicker and laugh with each other, a soft smile crosses his face. It's been way too long since he's seen them this happy and relaxed. Looking out the window at the townspeople going about their day, he has a massive realization. This world is supposed to be a cursed, vile, dark fantasy, but right now, it feels like a completely normal, peaceful slice-of-life anime. He deduces that the world was probably only a living hell because the original protagonist attracted pure chaos wherever he went. And with that thought, Wolka makes a firm mental note to stay as far away from the main plot's death flags as humanly possible, because if he gets dragged into the protagonist's mess, no amount of extra lives will be enough to save him. Standing on a rooftop doing his best Batman impression with his new peg leg, Wolka is deep in thought. He deeply regrets losing his leg in that boss battle, but more importantly, he's come to a terrifying realization. He is officially living inside the world of that manga. He knows he can't act recklessly anymore if he wants to survive and protect his squad, and he practically prays to the heavens that he doesn't encounter the original protagonist, knowing damn well that guy's plot armor will only put his master and the girls in mortal danger. Meanwhile, speaking of praying, we cut to Anze kneeling alone in a moonlit room, shedding tears as she asks the Lord why Wolka has to go through so much suffering. We get a brief, wholesome flashback of a young Wolka telling her that Anges is a really cool name, but asking if he can just call her Ans, which makes her current guilt trip even harder as she breaks down, hating herself for being powerless to help him yet again. Her weeping session is interrupted by a knock at the door from Roche, who checks if she's decent before asking if he should save his intelligence report for tomorrow. But Anze immediately flips the switch from crying maiden to absolute boss, demanding to hear everything he found out about the Gozel situation right now. Roach drops the intel, explaining that the local guild is actually innocent in this mess. They just received the clear report. The actual green light came from the Guild of the Holy Capital after a supposedly reliable group called the Party of the Royal Capital claimed the dungeon was cleared. Because of this botched approval process, a bunch of people died, and Wolka lost his leg. Hearing this, Anze goes dead-eyed and coldly states that she doesn't need to make a move just yet. Roach laughs, telling her she's making him sound like a barbarian rogue, but admits he's super relieved, casually dropping the terrifying fact that if Anze were to judge the culprit herself, they would be literally obliterated out of existence. He tells her to just focus on playing nurse for Wolka while he handles the dirty work, but Anze stares right through him, asking if he feels frustrated about what happened to their mutual friend. Roach's goofy playboy persona instantly shatters. Looking genuinely furious, he asks if that's even a question. He hypes Wolka up, saying his swordsmanship was unprecedented, superhuman techniques that literally don't exist in this nation. As a fellow swordsman, Roach respected him deeply, and the thought of Wolka never swinging a sword like that again makes his blood absolutely boil. But just as quickly as the dark aura appears, Roach forces his smile back, waving it off as personal feelings and saying he just wants to be a good bro to Wolka moving forward. Anze, not missing a beat, calls him out on his bluff, asking why he lied about going on dates with city girls in front of Wolka. Sweating, Roach defends himself on a technicality, claiming he did have meals with a lady, the nice guild receptionist who gave him all this secret intel. Anzi just sighs, thanks him for his hard work, and wishes him sweet dreams. But then the manga drops a tactical nuke of a plot twist. She formally addresses him as Holy Knight Roach Heart, and Roach respectfully bows, replying, "As you wish, Lady Heavenly Sword Saint Ange's Heart." Hold up, pause the video, they have the same last name? And this crying, overly emotional healer is actually the Heavenly Sword Saint? Yeah, Wolka's support squad is packing some absolutely absurd hidden lore. We get a little peek into Wolka's backstory, where he reveals that he's actually had memories of his past life for as long as he can remember, realizing pretty early on that he had been dropped straight into a classic, borderline cliché manga world full of dragons, knights, and magic. Since learning actual magic turned out to be way too much of a headache, his inner weeb completely took over. He figured that if the laws of physics are basically just suggestions in a fantasy world, he could totally replicate those superhuman, edgy anime moves in real life. Specifically, he became obsessed with the EI, that badass, lightning-fast, quick-draw katana slash that always one-shots enemies on screen. We even get a hilarious flashback of a tiny, overly enthusiastic Wolka begging his very confused master to train him exclusively in this weird, highly specific sword-drawing technique, no matter what. Cut back to the present, and Wolka is standing in the courtyard holding a wooden training katana, reflecting on how that goofy, foolish childhood motivation actually spiraled into more than a decade of hardcore, agonizing training, turning him into a true swordsman down to his very core. He internally sighs, trying to convince himself that he just needs to face reality and give up the blade, brushing off Liza's worried questions about whether it's too early for him to be doing this. Stepping up to a wooden training dummy while his entire waifu squad watches anxiously from the sidelines, Wolka has a moment of raw honesty with himself. He truly, deeply loves swordsmanship. He knows that trading his right leg and his eye to prevent the ultimate bad ending for his party was a fair price to pay, but man, he just can't let his passion go. He had finally perfected his dream quick-draw technique after years of grinding, and having his journey ripped away from him halfway through left him with massive, heavy regrets. Deciding to just go for it, he gets into his signature stance. He tries to play it cool, telling himself these are just some harmless test swings, but a huge grin creeps onto his face because he's just so damn happy to feel a sword in his hands again. But as he lowers his center of gravity on his new peg leg, something insane happens. The world around him completely drops away. He realizes that he isn't hindered at all. In fact, he can slip into the zone, even deeper and faster than before. He remembers the exact feeling, locking his single eye onto the target and perfectly visualizing the exact angle, speed, and conviction needed to completely obliterate whatever is in front of him. With a flash of pure, unadulterated instinct, he executes the draw. The wooden blade blurs through the air with a terrifying, explosive force. Wolka freezes mid-swing, his eye widening in absolute shock at the sheer, ridiculous power he just unleashed, while Lise and the rest of the girls stand there violently gasping, their jaws practically hitting the floor in pure disbelief. Yeah, it turns out losing a leg didn't nerf our boy even a little bit. If anything, it looks like he just accidentally unlocked his true, overpowered protagonist potential. But the epic moment comes to a screeching halt as Wolka instantly hits the dirt with a painful thud. The girls scream his name in a total panic and rush over to him. Wolka is lying there completely dazed, asking what happened, until Eulithia points out the tragic reality. His brand new wooden peg leg has been completely vaporized into splinters. Wolka lets out a hollow, awkward laugh as he realizes his fatal mistake. He explains to the squad that his signature quick-draw technique isn't just pure physical skill. It actually requires casting body-strengthening magic to achieve that insane, explosive burst of speed. The problem is, you can't exactly pump mana into a dead piece of town-grade wood. Because the prosthetic couldn't be magically buffed, it bore the absolute full, ungodly brunt of his swing's kinetic recoil and just straight-up exploded. Lying flat on his back, Wolka tries his hardest to play it cool. Internally, he knows that the only way to craft a leg that can handle his anime-level power is to forge one out of ultra-rare mithril, and his pride absolutely refuses to let him be a selfish burden and beg his harem to go on a legendary fetch quest just for his hobby. So, he feeds them, and himself, a massive dose of copium. He smiles and waves it off, saying the leg was just meant for daily walking anyway, and he never really had his hopes up. He tells his inner monologue that he expected this. It was just a silly little test, and there's absolutely no reason to get desperate. But the copium wears off incredibly fast. Throwing a gloved hand over his face to hide his expression, he grits his teeth in pure frustration, cursing himself and wondering why the hell he's so genuinely shocked and devastated when he already knew his days as a frontline swordsman were over. Seeing the usually stoic and reliable Walka break down in despair absolutely shatters the girls. We get a heartbreaking montage of Ulithia, Lize, and the rest of the squad welling up with tears, their faces painted with pure sorrow for the guy who sacrificed everything for them. Without saying a word, his master steps in and deploys the ultimate emotional support tactic, a surprise lap pillow. She gently pulls his head onto her lap, softly stroking his hair and whispering for him to just relax, while Lisa desperately clings to his hand, crying her eyes out in the dirt. It's an incredibly touching, tragic scene, but it turns out the party isn't exactly alone. Watching from the tree line like a couple of dramatic anime stalkers are Anze and Roche. Anze is quietly weeping with her hands clasped in prayer, once again tortured by her inability to magically fix his trauma. Roche, however, slowly clenches his fist with a completely different energy. He isn't looking at Walka with pity, he's looking at him with awe. The elite Holy Knight realizes that by fighting the Grim Reaper boss to the absolute edge of death, Walka didn't just survive, he broke his limiters and opened the gate to an entirely new realm of strength. Roche reminisces that their lifetime sparring record is deadlocked at exactly 49 wins and 49 losses. But he admits with a bittersweet smile that if they were to cross swords right now, Walka's new, highly evolved technique would absolutely wipe the floor with him. And that realization makes Roche quietly fume, knowing it is a massive, crying shame that the most terrifyingly talented swordsman he knows is now permanently benched just because he's missing a leg and an eye. Roche continues to watch this heartbreaking scene from the shadows, hitting us with some genuinely deep psychological analysis. He knows exactly who Walka is at his core, a stubborn warrior who would absolutely never willingly give up the blade just to sit back and live a peaceful, boring life of leisure. But the real problem here isn't just Walka's shattered wooden leg, it's the severe PTSD his party is suffering from. These girls literally watched him get torn apart and pushed to the absolute verge of death right in front of their eyes. Roche points out a painful irony. The more they love and value Walka, the more grief and anxiety they will feel if he chooses to walk the path of a swordsman again, because they are terrified that next time he might actually die for real. Our perceptive knight realizes that the ultimate hurdle Walka has to face head-on isn't his physical disability, but the overwhelming protective trauma of the companions right by his side. Deciding that this atmosphere is getting way too gloomy and depressing for everyone involved, our favorite flashy playboy knight decides it's time to step in and do what he does best. Striding out from the tree line with a confident smirk, Roche announces his arrival loudly, teasing Walka for doing things real flashy again. Striking an absolutely fabulous dramatic pose that completely shatters the somber mood, he scolds Walka like a disappointed wingman. He calls our boy a truly hopeless fellow for making such lovely mademoiselles cry, loudly lecturing him that he desperately needs to be more mindful of a lady's feelings. It's the exact kind of ridiculous comedic relief the squad needs to snap out of their spiral of despair. However, you can't just magically erase trauma with a joke. Later that night, as the moon shines quietly through the window of the inn, we see Walka finally resting peacefully in his bed. But the chapter ends on an incredibly gut-wrenching note. Lise is right there beside him in the dark, resting her head against his mattress, absolutely consumed by survivor's guilt. As tears stream down her face while her master sleeps, she just repeatedly whispers into the silence over and over again, I'm sorry, so sorry, Walka. Seriously, someone please get these girls some therapy, and for the love of the gods, get this man a mithril leg already so we can see him completely break the power scaling of this world. We jump into a flashback from 6 years ago, diving deep into the lore of the great mage Lizalarte. Back in the day, people used to constantly talk trash behind her back, mocking her for looking like a literal child and pointing out the hilarious irony that a first-rate mage like her didn't have a single apprentice. Lise actually spent over a century living in complete solitude without any students or even friends to keep her company. That is, until one fateful day while she was casually cruising on her flying broom, checking her map on the way to the next city. She hears a vicious growl from the forest below and spots what looks like a defenseless child being cornered by a pack of massive, terrifying wolf monsters. Seeing her chance to be a hero, Lise readies her magical staff, dramatically declaring herself as Lisa Larte the Great Mage and preparing to valiantly smite the beasts. But right before she can cast her spell, she completely freezes. She senses a horrifying, suffocating wave of bloodlust, and to her absolute shock, it isn't coming from the monsters, it's coming from the boy. In the blink of an eye, the kid draws a wooden sword and unleashes a blindingly fast slash, instantly culling all 4 giant beasts in a single stroke, leaving Lise staring with her jaw literally on the floor. Trying to play it cool, she unceremoniously lands her broom right next to him, but the mood is instantly ruined when the boy turns around, looks at this centuries-old legendary mage, and bluntly asks, "A child?" Lise completely loses her temper, screaming at him that she is older than him by orders of magnitude and calling him an insolent lout for judging a book by its cover. The boy, who is obviously a young Wolka, just sweat drops and apologizes, casually mentioning he's bummed that one monster managed to get away. Impressed despite her bruised ego, Lise asks where his party is, only to find out this overpowered kid is wandering completely solo. Intrigued, she asks him to show her that magical strength aura he used during the attack. Wolka powers up, and Lise immediately puts her professor glasses on. She notes that while his aura is strong, it's incredibly inefficient and poorly compacted because it's completely self-taught, warning him that he won't be able to hold a spell like that for very long. Wolka just shrugs, casually flexing that he can hold it for about 4 hours tops, though he admits he passed out a few times while running it just to level it up. Hearing this, Liza's brain practically short-circuits. She goes full shark teeth mode, screaming at him for being an unbelievable numbskull, internally weeping over the fact that it took her 7 years of grueling training just to hold that exact same spell for 5 minutes. She furiously lectures him that his reckless training could have easily killed him. Coughing to regain her dignified composure, Lise decides right then and there that their meeting is absolute fate. Disgusted by his atrocious, unrefined magic use, she forcefully declares herself his new mentor, absolutely refusing to let him butcher the magical arts on her watch. Wolka is a bit confused by this sudden, aggressive adoption, but he flashes a polite smile and accepts her offer. Cut to the very next day, and we see exactly how this highly anticipated magical training is going. Wolka is dead asleep at a desk while Lise screams at him to wake up because they've only covered 5 pages of a textbook. Our boy groans, complaining that reading about constellations sucks and begging for some actual hands-on combat practice. Lise scolds him for taking magic too lightly, insisting he needs to fully understand the theory first. But seeing him struggle, her maternal instincts quickly take over. Acting like the ultimate tsundere teacher, she sighs and offers to read along with him, promising him some practical training once they finish the chapter. Fast forward through just 1 week of rigorous, textbook-heavy training, and Wolka is already putting his newly refined strength buff to use, effortlessly slicing up a massive wolf monster. Lisa stands in the background acting like the proudest mom ever, praising him for finally getting a solid handle on his mana. But what happens next completely breaks our ancient mage's brain. Wolka turns to her with those sparkling, earnest protagonist eyes and begs her to teach him more magic, respectfully addressing her as master. Lisa's face instantly turns tomato red. After spending over a century being mocked by society for looking like a straight-up child, hearing this incredibly talented boy genuinely call her master sends her into emotional overdrive. She tries to maintain her dignity, putting her hand to her cheek and dropping a smug anime laugh, bragging about how she is a tremendously good mage, and it's only natural he'd want her to mentor him. However, Wolka completely misreads the room. Thinking she's trying to let him down easy because she's too busy, he awkwardly starts to retract his request. Lisa instantly panics, dropping the smug act, practically shaking him, and desperately demanding that he be more pushy and ask her again right now. Wolka formally requests to be her apprentice one more time, and Liza happily accepts with the brightest, most genuine smile, officially taking him in as her first ever student. We then get a super wholesome montage of Wolka practicing his sword swings in the yard while Lise watches him like a hawk. She internally admits that her new apprentice is criminally cute and endearing, but that realization brings a massive wave of separation anxiety. She starts sweating bullets, paranoid that some random knight or adventurer guild is going to poach her prodigy and take him away forever. Refusing to let him leave her side, she decides she needs to officially lock him down. Blushing furiously and clutching her chest, she nervously asks if he'd be interested in forming an actual party with her. For a split second, Wolka just looks confused, and Lisa's internal monologue immediately spirals into pure despair, thinking she'll have to literally unalive herself if he rejects her. But Wolka quickly breaks the silence with a warm smile, thanking her and saying he'd really appreciate it, pointing out that since he's already her apprentice, teaming up just makes perfect sense. Lise bursts into tears of pure joy, aggressively double-checking if he's serious before excitedly agreeing. And just like that, the legendary party Silver Grey is born. They didn't have some edgy, world-saving destiny or grand convictions. They just lived at their own pace, taking quests, saving people, slaying monsters, and making cash. For Lise, who had spent 100 years in complete, depressing isolation, traveling the world with Wolka was the most fun she had ever had in her life. But of course, you can't have an overpowered, kind-hearted protagonist without an accidental harem forming. As their journey continued, Wolka's sheer riz started attracting more members. First was Ulithia, who practically begged Wolka to take her as his disciple after becoming absolutely captivated by his badass quick-draw techniques. Soon after, they picked up Atri, a heavyweight warrior who hit it off with Wolka during an impromptu team-up and casually asked to permanently tag along. While Wolka is just being friendly, Lise is standing in the background violently glaring daggers at the new recruits, specifically focusing her rage on their massive chest assets, which our flat-chested great mage is clearly extremely envious of. Lise admits that at first, she was super petty and rankled by the idea of these new girls stealing Wolka away from her, but she eventually had to concede that both Ulithia and Atri were actually incredibly sweet girls, officially solidifying the core squad that would eventually follow Wolka all the way to that tragic boss room. Before she even realized it, the four of them had become a genuinely tight-knit family, and Lise reminisces about how incredibly fun their travels were once the party expanded, fully believing that these happy, carefree days would just go on forever. But of course, this is a dark fantasy manga, so we aren't allowed to have nice things. The reality check hits Lise like a freight train as we cut to the horrific aftermath of the Grim Reaper boss fight, where she is staring in absolute traumatized horror. She narrates that while Wolka miraculously managed to narrowly avoid death, the cost was unimaginably steep. His left leg was completely ripped off, and it's highly unlikely he'll ever see out of his right eye again. Back at the church clinic, the girls are desperately grilling the head nun, asking why patching him up like this is the absolute best they can do. The nun bluntly tells them that the mere fact Wolka is breathing is a literal miracle, revealing a gruesome, badass, yet horrifying detail. Even after his leg was violently torn off, Wolka used his magic to forcibly move the severed limb just to keep fighting. Doing so severely burned the wound and obliterated whatever bones were left, making it completely impossible to heal properly. Hearing this, Liza's heart shatters. She flashes back to a peaceful day watching Wolka practice his swings, where he cheerfully admitted that swordsmanship was basically his entire reason for living, the only true talent he had. Lise realizes with horrifying clarity that the boy is an absolute sword junkie, and the thought of stealing the leg and eye away from someone whose entire soul is dedicated to the blade makes her physically sick. We get a quick flashback to the moment they accepted the fatal quest to investigate the supposedly cleared dungeon Gozel, and Lise realizes that she was the one who casually greenlit it. As she watches Wolka quietly curse his missing limbs in the present, the guilt completely consumes her. She relentlessly beats herself up over her foolish lapse in judgment, hating herself for failing to do her proper job as an adventurer and missing the dungeon's anomaly. In her mind, her powerlessness is the sole reason her beloved, one and only apprentice had his life completely destroyed. The mental toll is just too much, and we see our usually proud great mage lying alone in bed, completely broken,
sobbing uncontrollably into her sheets as she repeats, "Because of my fault," and "I'm so sorry, Wolka," over and over again in a truly heartbreaking spiral of survivor's guilt. Fortunately, we don't stay in the depression zone forever, jumping forward 1 week later. Wolka is back at the clinic receiving his newly repaired wooden prosthetic leg from the exasperated nun, who threatens not to fix it again if he breaks it doing some crazy anime sword techniques. Strapping it on, Wolka decides it's finally time to get discharged and start the journey back to the holy capital. But before they leave town, he mentions he needs to hit up the local adventurers guild to see if he can procure a more durable leg for the trip. As the scene shifts to the bustling guild building, the camera pans down to reveal a brand new character standing outside, a nervous-looking girl with messy hair, wearing a white robe and tightly clenching a wooden staff. Who is she, and what does she want? Well, it looks like Wolka's party might be getting another unexpected addition, but we'll just have to wait to find out.